Story time about how my best friend got expelled for breaking a sink at my school with another girl's head. Yeah. Background information, my best friend Hannah had a huge crush on this boy who we're gonna call Max. So, she had been trying to pursue something with him, and then I get a DM on Instagram from somebody completely random, don't know who they are, that this other girl, who we're gonna call Vivian, also likes Max. Now, here's the thing. Vivian and Hannah already had beef with each other.
Oh, hell no. I don't even want to do no research on that shit.
From some shit that they had been through before this. But because Hannah was my best friend, I thought that the only reasonable, logical thing to do was to tell her that there was another girl trying to steal her man, who wasn't her man. Well, it actually turned out that that was one of the worst things that I ever could have done, because after that, Hannah was like, I'm going to beat this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And wow, Hannah kept true to her word, because the one day around lunchtime, Hannah walks into the bathroom and she catches Vivian alone. Then I walk in, and as soon as I seen that, I knew that it was over for Vivian. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, this beating was a little bit too personal to be about a boy, so whatever happened between them before, it must have been really bad, because Hannah went in on her. Ignore the makeup, it's for a different video. Okay. Anyway, so Vivian goes over to her, and she starts fighting her. But while Hannah was fighting her, she just kept getting more mad and more mad and more mad. And that's whenever she finally decided to literally just smash Vivian's head into the sink.
We do not care.
So after that, we walk out of the bathroom like nothing ever happened. Well, fast forward a few minutes later, I see Vivian walk out of the bathroom holding her head, and there's a bunch of blood pouring down her head as well. And then after the principals found out that it was Hannah, obviously Vivian and her mom pressed charges against Hannah. Hannah went to juvie for 3 or 4 months, and she got expelled. And I lost contact with Hannah after that. And then I'm pretty sure that Vivian had maybe went into a coma, maybe had a little bit of memory loss. I don't know. She kind of got her head smashed into a sink. But I wasn't really close with her, so I don't really care what happened to her. But I actually saw Hannah in Walmart not too long ago, and we are best friends again. Storytime about falling into a dug-up grave. So a little background information, my dad was a teenager in the late 1950s, and he used to work at this restaurant that was near a local cemetery. Now, to get to work, he could either run through the cemetery or go around the cemetery. And more often than not, he would just go through the cemetery because nobody wants to add an extra 10 or 15 minutes to their walk, especially to work. Now, being 15 years old, going through the cemetery at night still low-key scared him. So the one night he got off of work and he was running home through the cemetery, and he fell into a dug-up grave. And my dad was not a big guy, so he tried to get out of there as best as he could, but after a few hours, he just gave up. Now, I guess some other kid had the same exact idea that he did, so he hears footsteps quickly approaching the grave, and then all of a sudden, some kid falls into the dug-up grave with him. So after a few minutes of watching this kid try to get out of the grave as well, my dad goes, "You know you're never gonna get out of here, right?" My dad said this kid jumped up 6 feet and ran. Pretty funny story from my dad's point of view, but pretty scary for the other kid. Storytime about how my boyfriend was dating me and some other girl at the same time. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and a junior in high school, and we're gonna call my boyfriend Tyler. So Tyler and I met back in middle school, but we were like barely even friends. Well, fast forward to my junior year in high school, he reached out to me and eventually him and I were talking every single day. So fast forward 3 months, him and I were definitely more than a friendship because we were doing everything that couples would do just without the label. Well, the one day him and I are hanging out and we're taking pictures on his Snapchat and sending them to his friends. And then I see that his number one best friend is this girl named Bailey. Now, the reason why I wasn't on his best friends list was because I didn't have Snapchat. But the only reason why this is a problem is because him and his friends Snapchat each other all day. And I'm talking like spam the fuck out of each other. So for her to be at the top of his best friends list, they have to be Snapchatting a lot. So I had asked him if it was this one girl that we both knew, like for part 2. Storytime about how my fiance cheated on me with 10 other girls. So a little background information, I met this guy on Instagram and we're gonna call him Bryce. Now, when him and I met, he was stationed in Korea and he refused to ask me to be his girlfriend until he came home. So I waited an entire year for him to ask me to be his girlfriend. Which low-key should have been a red flag, but he made it seem romantic in some twisted, weird way. So fast forward, he comes home in February. And he kept to his promise. The first day that we met, he asked me to be his girlfriend. So I say yes, fast forward. Him and I start having a ton of arguments because of things that he was doing while he was in Korea. Fast forward, we're officially together for 9 months. So fast forward, of course, he gets deployed to Europe in like September of 2022. So this man decides that he's going to propose to me in July and then beg me to get married to him before he leaves. Now, I may have ignored the first red flags, but I'm not dumb. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I came out to my very homophobic parents. So like I said before, my boyfriend and I had decided to take our relationship a step further, and his parents knew that he was gay and that him and I were in a relationship. But my parents, on the other hand, did not know. They just thought that him and I were best friends that hung out every single day. But yeah, my parents think that doing the nasty before marriage is a sin, being gay is a sin. Pretty much doing anything is a sin. So the one day I was in my room watching RuPaul's Drag Race. By the way, I don't know if I pronounced that right. And then my mom walks in and she says, I don't want you watching these men in wigs and heels, acting like females, blah, blah, blah. That's a sin. Like, Mom, go get a fucking life. Thanks. And then she says, if I find out you're a part of this, you're going to need God and Jesus to protect you from me. So my boyfriend and I are in complete shock. Well, then I finally decided that I was going to grow some balls and tell my mom that I was a part of that community. Like for part 3. Part 2 about how my best friend was a snake. So like I said, I had to move away for 3 months because of my dad, and Jake and I, we stopped talking about 2 weeks after I had left. And then I get a text from my friend saying, hey, you know Callie and that guy that you were talking to, Jake? Obviously I say yes. And then she goes, oh, well, they're talking about getting together. And I was livid. I'm like, dude, I've literally been gone for like less than a month and you're already trying to get with the guy that I liked. What the actual you know what? So I bawled my eyes out for like 2 hours straight. And then I decide that I'm going to confront her. And she literally says to me, like, she has the audacity to say that she's been in love with him for so long, even before I had told her about him. Which is a lie, because as I told you guys earlier, she didn't know this man. Well, anyways, Jake ended up friend-zoning her, and she didn't even really apologize to me. She said sorry, but like, she didn't acknowledge the importance of the situation and how it made me feel. She just thought that saying sorry would make it all better. Part 2 about why my aunt put me back into foster care. So like I said, I found a way that I was going to get kicked out, and it was by fighting this girl. And yes, I won. But fast forward, eventually my sisters and I move in with my aunt. And if you guys ever heard the phrase honeymoon, you probably think of a relationship, right? Wrong. I was actually shocked about how fast everything went downhill whenever we got there. Like, eventually my cousins just started being mean to me for no reason, while they favored my sisters. And when I say cousins, you guys are probably thinking they're around my age. No, they were actually in their 20s. Hell, one was even close to 30. Like, these were grown-ass adults beating on a 15-year-old. So eventually my cousins, my aunt, and I are fighting almost every single day. And the one day my sister and I got into an argument that eventually turned into us fighting. And my cousins love to jump in every fight that my sister and I have. Well, they jumped in this fight, and instead of helping break it up, they actually made it worse. The one was holding my leg down, and eventually I got it up and I kicked her in the face. And my aunt thought that it was my fault, so she sent me to Storytime about how this guy was cheating on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. And the one day one of my friends, Josh, decided to expose this kid named Caden because this guy Caden posted on his Snapchat story, anybody who's 14 and younger, unadd me. I find it so weird that you little girls are swiping up on my stories calling me cute. So my best friend Josh decides to expose this man, and he's like, weren't you just hanging out with a 12-year-old the other day? Make it make sense. So, you know, I only add Caden because I was going to tell him that he's gross and disgusting for hanging out with 12-year-olds. But after he sent me a picture of his face saying hi, yeah, I immediately fell in love with this man. I know this looks bad. Trust me. I know. Anyways, when I started talking to this kid, I really thought that he was on some fuckboy type shit. He was actually super sweet and really kind. Bruh. Like, he never asked me for nudes or anything. He also told me that he was single, so him and I started flirting. And y'all, I really thought that this man was about to be my husband. Now, of course, I low-key doubted him a little bit, so I ended up taking screenshots of every one of our messages. Well, him and I had never actually met in person, but we did have plans to meet up that weekend. So a few days before him and I are supposed to meet up, all of a sudden he literally went ghost. I didn't hear from him all day. And then when I go to Snapchat him, bro has me blocked on almost everything. He had me blocked on Instagram as well, but he had 2 accounts on Instagram and he forgot to block me on the one. And And Instagram really snitched on this man. Because when I clicked on his Instagram, it had the suggested accounts. Some girl with a profile picture of him and her popped up. And she had their date in her bio. They have been dating for a whole fucking year.
Don't be shocked. You're shocked? You're shocked?
So obviously I'm finna tell her that her man was cheating on her, but whenever I add her on Snapchat, she immediately sends me a message that says, if this is about Caden, I don't want to hear it. So instead of talking to her about Caden, I literally just sent her all of the screenshots from these past 2 weeks that him and I have been talking. The only thing I said after that was, he's been cheating on you with me. So then she literally just responds with a video of them and she's like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I personally wouldn't stay with him, but to each their own. Anyways, so fast forward, they're still together, and I'm still blocked on everything. Story time about how one of my best friends started blackmailing me. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and a junior in high school, and my parents are friends with this other married couple who has a son that is around my age. He's 17, about to be 18, and we're gonna call him Derek. Well, him and I somehow ended up getting into the same friend group, and he got my number, and him and I started texting a lot. So fast forward, my birthday comes around, and I end up having a party. And some of my cousins were around my age as well, so they were there, and my whole friend group was there, including Derek, of course. Well, surprise, surprise, there were booze and marijuana there, so I ended up getting kind of messed up. And then, as you can guess, Derek and I did the nasty. And surprise again, he had took some pictures and videos of me drinking and stuff. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he sent me a message that literally said for me to send him nude pictures and do stuff for him physically, or else he was going to send these pictures to my parents. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend was seeing another girl behind my back. So like I said, I told him that we were going to have to do long distance, and he was sad, but then he said that he could trust me. And like I said before, why the hell would I have to trust you? Because you should just be loyal in general, duh. So I'm like, hey, I want to spend time with you before I leave. Can we hang out? And he was like, oh, sorry, I have plans, but we can hang out later tonight. So I was like, okay, whatever. And a few hours go by. I never get a text from him or a call, nothing. So I text him and he's like, sorry, I forgot. So I'm really sad right now, but I forgave him. Quick note here, ladies, if he wanted to, he would. He would have canceled his plans if he really wanted to see you. Anyways, so I move and fast forward 2 to 3 weeks. And Alex and I literally have only been texting, no calls, nothing like that. So I'm talking to one of his friends, and one of his friends tells me that he's been talking to this other girl. And he's been telling everybody that he's been wanting to break up with me for weeks because he wants to date her instead, like for part 3. Story time about my toxic ex-best friend. So a little background information. I had a very close guy friend who we're going to call Max. Now, Max was 2 years older than me, but due to our families being super close, him and I became best friends. Growing up, I saw him as kind of an older brother. And then eventually, as we grew up, I saw him as my best friend. Until I realized that he was actually a terrible person. And I missed all of the signs that he was not a real friend. Like 1, our first fight, I told him something that I didn't want anybody else knowing. And what do you know, right after I tell him, my family knows, his family knows, my crush knows, all of our friends know. After this, I probably should have distanced myself, but he apologized and we became friends again. That was sign number 1. Sign number 2, his huge change in attitude. 1 second, he would be extremely rude to me, and then he would be this really sweet and caring guy, and his apologies were the best. So it was really hard not to forgive him. He was like a master manipulator. Number 3, we only talked whenever it was convenient for him. Like seriously, we would never talk unless he needed something, like for part 2. Story time about why you just can't bring some friends around your boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 17 and a junior in high school. And I had been best friends with this one girl who we're going to call Lily for about 2 years. Now, Lily and I weren't your ordinary best friends. We were the ones that would party together, but we would never talk about anything serious. And when I mean serious things, I mean like a secret that you don't want anybody to know. Just for a little example, the one time I told her that I thought I was pregnant, and clearly she knew that I was super scared, and I told her I don't want anybody to know, please don't say anything. In about 30 minutes, I had like 20 people asking me if I was pregnant, and then somehow my parents found out. She's also the best friend that you keep away from any guy that you like. Well, I have been dating this guy who we're gonna call Jared for 6 months. And obviously, now that I have a boyfriend, I've stopped hanging out with her as much. But my whole thing is she would never give me a heads up on plans. She would literally just text me and be like, hey, we're going out tonight. And I would text her back and I would be like, sorry, I can't. I already have plans with Jared. So this made her really upset, like for part 2. Part 3 about how my cat got me grounded, and yes, I am talking about my pet cat. So like I said, I had a foolproof plan to escape, okay? I was going to get out the window and I was going to just crawl back in and act like nothing ever happened. But there was an issue with this, okay? My dad was supposed to fix my window because I somehow broke it. I don't even know how. But anytime that I go to put my window up, it just literally falls. And not only does it fall, it locks when it falls. And obviously you can guess what will happen if it does fall. I won't be able to get back in the house and I will somehow have to get in the house without my parents knowing, which is literally impossible. So I will be grounded for the rest of my life. So I was going to put a book between the window and the windowsill, but I didn't want it falling and making a lot of noise. So I decided to put a pillow there. So I snuck out of my house at 11 o'clock and I had the best time of my life. Probably because that's the first and only time that I will ever be invited to any party. But fast forward, I go and I run to the side of the house to get into my window. And of course the pillow is missing. And I'm looking around to see where the pillow went in my room. And of course my cat is laying on it on the floor. So I tried messing with the window and then all of a sudden my parents walked in my room and saw me. Part 2 about why I hate Valentine's Day. So like I said, I Uber to his apartment and I knock on the door and I hear some woman from inside say, "Don't worry, babe, I'll get it." So I hurry up and try to tie my coat because I had untied it thinking that my boyfriend was going to open the door. But no, why would my boyfriend open his own door to his own apartment that he lives alone in? So she opens the door and she's like, "Hi, what can I help you with?" And I'm like, "Oh, is this apartment blah, blah, blah?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, well, is Jimmy here?" And she was like, "Yeah." So she calls Jimmy over to the door. I look directly at him and I'm like, "Oh, is this like your friend or something?" And she's like, "Excuse me, I'm his fiance." So I'm looking at him all confused and I start screaming that he's a liar, a cheater. He's like, "Babe, go call the police. I have no idea who this woman is. She sounds crazy." So his fiance walks away and he goes, "I'm sorry, I'll call you later." And then security escorts me off the property. Needless to say, I never talk to him ever again. Story time about how this boy stabbed me with a pencil in kindergarten. So a little background information, I was 6 years old and in kindergarten, obviously. I'm not gonna lie, this story kind of shows that it doesn't matter how old a child is, they can literally still be very mean and yeah. Well, during the middle of the school year, there was this new kid who came to our class and his name was Freddie. Now, Freddie coming in the middle of the year was kind of sad because everybody already had their friends. They didn't really want to talk to the new kid. And what made it even worse was the fact that he was a teacher's pet. And he was the teacher's favorite. So he was always picked to go up to the board and be the line leader, which made the kids hate him even more. For example, during lunch, Freddie would go and try to sit with some of the kids and they would call the teacher over, say that he was doing something that was annoying them or really gross. And the teachers would remove him and put him at a table alone by himself. And I was one of the kids that didn't really make fun of him. I just kind of sat back and laughed, which I know is terrible. But like for part 2. Story time about how my best friend made my whole school hate me. So a little background information, I was 13 and in 8th grade. And so was my best friend who we are going to call Layla. And we met at a birthday party of a mutual friend during that summer. And all three of us started to hang out every day. And then when school started back up, the trio fell apart. Because our other friend Alice went to a different school, so she couldn't really hang out with us as much. When we first started school, there was this boy that I met and I really liked him and we started dating. But Layla and I had our own little friend group. There were 5 of us. Then there was this girl named Ivy. She had 4 people in her group, and our friend groups did not like each other at all. There was maybe one person from both groups that hung out with the other group, but that was it. And the only reason why none of us were friends was because the main girls, like the leaders of the group, used to be best friends. But then Ivy went behind Layla's back and started talking to this boy that Layla liked, and that's literally why they're not friends anymore. Well, all of us in the friend group were friends, but I was Layla's best friend. Like for part 2. Storytime about how I found out that my best friend screwed my boyfriend. So a little background information, this happened whenever I was between 16 and 21 years old and I was a sophomore in high school. During the summer just before school started, my boyfriend Ryan moved to town. But sadly, whenever he moved here, his mom passed away, so he ended up missing the first 2 weeks of school. Fast forward, Ryan comes to school and he ends up becoming best friends with my guy best friend, and him and I had a bunch of classes together, so we would talk all the time. Obviously, this led to me having a crush on him. So him and I end up dating, and that's whenever we switch lunch tables to sit with my other friends. And then fast forward about 2 months into Ryan and I's relationship, my ex came to my house the one night and he SA'd me. The next day, I told my boyfriend what happened and he agreed that it wasn't my fault, but he said he would need some time to get over it. Fast forward, we end up moving on and we did the nasty a few times. And then my best friend Maddie told me the only reason why he did nasty with me was because he felt like I was more experienced than him. So I end up breaking up with him because I felt like he deserved better than me. He ended up never ever speaking to me, but later on, I heard a rumor that somebody saw Ryan and Maddie together. So I confront her about it, and she told me that she was just comforting him after what I did to him. Isn't it funny how there are those friends who go to comfort your ex during the breakup instead of you? A little sus if you ask me. Fast forward 5 years later, he comes into the place that I work, and my work best friend Ashley gives my number to his friend to give to Ryan. So I texted him that night, and then I woke up the next morning to a text that says, "Who is this?" And then over that weekend, we ended up like reconnecting. Then a month later, I got kicked out of my house and I moved in with him. And plot twist, 8 months later, one thing led to another. He proposed to me. And then 5 months later, we also ended up moving into a bigger apartment. Well, I ended up buying him a new phone, and that is whenever I saw text messages between him and Maddie. And they weren't just messages. These messages were very spicy. Also, this is while she was in a relationship with a freshman while we were seniors. I forgave him for lying because obviously we weren't in a relationship, but it's pretty effed up that that was my best friend. And obviously Maddie and I are not friends anymore. Story time about how my best friend was stealing from me. A little background information. I was 17 or 18 whenever this all happened, and I was a senior in high school. Now, my family and I had just moved to a new state, and that is where I met my best friend, who we are going to call Grace. Now, Grace and I clicked instantly, but anytime that we would hang out, she would always want to come to my house and never wanted to go to hers. Her excuse was that she had a lot of siblings and our house was super small, there was nothing to do, you know, which I didn't really care. I had no problem with this at all, until some weird shit started happening in my house. And when I say weird shit, I mean that stuff in my house literally started disappearing. Now, at first, I wasn't that suspicious because it was just my clothes. And y'all know how things get lost in the laundry sometimes. But then it started to become stuff like my shoes and purses. So, you know, I go and I ask my mom if she's seen any of my clothes or shoes or purses. And she goes and looks through her things to see if anything might be mixed in, but while she's doing that, she's realizing that some of her shit is missing too. So at first we're thinking that it's the cleaning lady, which I feel super bad about, but you know, before we blame anybody else that, you know, we love and trust and we think would never steal from us, we would think that it would be more logical for somebody who doesn't really know us to steal from us. So we confront her and she denies everything, but just to be sure, we did something to test her and she did not steal our shit. But after this, we're getting a little bit worried that other stuff in the house might be missing, so we go and look and our jewelry is missing as well. So now we only had 2 suspects. First we had my cousin because she would stay over sometimes, and then we had Grace, which I thought was very unlikely because she was always with me. But nonetheless, I started to be more cautious around her. I would try to be more aware of where and what she was doing while she was in my house. And for a few days, nothing happened. So obviously, after a few times of her coming over, I was 99.9% sure that she wasn't stealing from us. But then, of course, the one night, she must have not realized that I was still awake because she got up to, I'm assuming, go to the bathroom. So I keep pretending to be asleep. And when she walked out of my room, I saw her walk towards the living room. And I decided not to go out there. Instead, I was going to wait until she came back with shit because that would be super awkward if I just went out there and she really could have just been getting some water or something. Well, what do you know? She comes back with some of our shit and she stuffs it in her book bag. So I decided not to confront her. I actually wait till the next day to just tell my mom about it. And that's when she told me that I just wasn't allowed to speak to Grace again or see her. But I wanted my shit back, so I go to her house to surprise her. Her sister ends up answering the door and she lets me in. So, you know, she brings me into the living room and I'm sitting on the couch, and whenever Grace comes into the living room, you all should have saw her. It looked like she's seen a fucking ghost. And then she goes, "Why are you here?" Like, girl, you're not even gonna pretend to be happy to see me after you just stole all my shit? After you just robbed me? How rude of you. No, but I actually told her that I was there to finish a project with her, so she was like, okay, we can do it in the living room. And then I tell her that I need to go to the bathroom, and I go back. I find her room. As soon as I walk in, I see my shit. So I pull my phone out and I record everything. And she walks in her room. I don't even care. I'm literally still recording everything. Like, she's crying and saying, "Oh my goodness, like, you know, my mom made me steal this stuff because we're low-key down bad right now and we need money, da-da-da-da-da, and she knew y'all were rich." Like, babe, do me a favor. Save the sob story for someone who cares. And okay, just for shits and giggles, let's say that you are struggling. If you're struggling that bad, you would have been sold my shit, because why is everything still in your room? So, I threatened to call the cops on her unless she gives all my shit back, and she didn't want that, so obviously she gave it all back. Well, I did find out a few days later that she was, in fact, trying to sell my stuff, but I don't care. You should have just came to me instead of fucking somebody over who actually cared about you. Part 2 about how I unintentionally almost drowned my sister. Like I said, I have her floaties on, I'm in the deep end of the pool, she's screaming at me, telling me to take them off, I'm ignoring her. And then what does her crazy ass decide to do? She decides to get into the pool and try and get them from me. Now, my sister was super tiny. Like, even being in the shallow end of the pool, she really couldn't stick her head above the water. Now, I'm pretty sure that all swimming pools are like this, but there's a slope that goes into the deep end, and it's super slippery. So she comes over to try and get the floaties from me, and then she slips. It was literally like a cartoon where the cartoon characters are moving their feet backwards really fast. And I thought that she was just joking around, so I'm just sitting there staring at her until she actually starts choking, and then my dad hurries up and runs outside, thank God. I feel like dads just have superpowers to know whenever their kids are in trouble. Anyway, so he jumps into the pool and he saves her. He ends up spraining his ankle, and I wasn't allowed in the pool for the rest of the weekend. Now, of course, this had me pretty pissed off, but now that I'm an adult, I can story time about how I got catfished by my ex-boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and I was in 10th grade. And I had been dating this guy who we're going to call Jack since my freshman year in high school. Now, the first year of our relationship was absolutely amazing, no complaints. But then fast forward, we get into 10th grade and all of a sudden he changes. Now, Jake had always been a super nice person, but for some reason this year he decided that he wanted to be extra friendly to people, mainly girls. I didn't really think anything of it at the time because he told me he wanted to change up his characteristics, whatever the fuck that means. But the one day I'm in the library and then my friend Chloe walks in and she shows me a video of him rubbing some girl's thigh. And then when I confronted him about it, he was like, babe, she was forcing me to. I promise it'll never happen again. Well, I believed him. But because of this, I started paying way more attention to his actions. I realized he started going out way more and he would always have his location off. And when I confront him about it, he absolutely flips out on me, like for part 2. Storytime about how this girl pretended to be my best friend just to go on vacation with me. So a little background information, I was 14 and a freshman in high school, and we're going to call this girl Sophia. Sophia and I met whenever we were in 6th grade, and we were inseparable. And shortly after her and I had became best friends, my mom thought that it would be nice for us to go on vacation to Hawaii in 2 years. She also said that my brother and I would be able to bring one friend each. So I asked Sophia if she wanted to come to Hawaii in 2 years, and of course she said yes. Keep in mind, I was popular, Sophia was kind of lame, and I'm not even saying that just to be mean, but it's true. So over the next 2 years, her and I are hanging out every day, sneaking out together because we also live like 2 minutes away from each other. And my brother decided that he was going to bring his friend Noah. And I had a crush on Noah, and Sophia knew this, but she would always flirt with him in front of me. I really should have saw this as a red flag, but we love to ignore those. And then out of nowhere, Sophia starts dressing like me and starts getting more popular in school. Like for part 2. Storytime about why you should never get romantically involved with someone that you work with. So a little background information, I was working at one of the largest discount retail stores in the US, and about a couple months into me working there, my manager and I took a liking to each other. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm underage and he's a full-grown adult. But that's besides the point. Him and I, we started sneaking around a lot together, and about a month after him and I were screwing around with each other, he wanted to end things. Which I was like, alright, sure, whatever. But clearly he didn't mean it because we were still doing the same stuff that we were doing before he, quote, ended things with me. Anyway, so a random day at work, I don't know what the hell crawled up his ass, but he just snapped at me the one day. He starts threatening to write me up, and he started talking down to me any chance that he got. Like, how are you gonna talk down to me when you literally were just hanging out with me last week? Like, you're a full-grown man. Act like it, please. Like for part 2. Part 3 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, she posted stuff online about my mental health, and then her and I, we ended up fighting at school, and her mom decided to press charges. But then I ended up showing the cops everything that she had said to me online and all the bullying that she was doing, and how she would literally blackmail me into being friends with her. And this made Jenna and Jenna's mom super unhappy, so they ended up filing a false report about me to the police, saying that I have illegal stuff in my house, and I do this, and I do that, and I plan on unaliving my mom. Like, what the fuck? So in the middle of the night, my whole family and I are woken up by this loud banging on our front door. So my mom hurry up, go open the door, and they're saying that they have a warrant, and come to find out, the only thing that they could find were a bunch of empty vapes, which my mom was not happy about. And yeah, my mom and I's relationship is super rocky sometimes, but I would never try to unalive her. Part 2 about how my boyfriend was hiding his 2-year relationship from me. So like I said, every day after that, him and I were pretty much inseparable. We would FaceTime literally 24/7. We would always sit together during lunch, during class. Well, the one day I'm sitting in my homeroom and he comes in and he asked me to be his girlfriend. Of course I said yes. So fast forward to Halloween, my family was handing out candy and he was going trick-or-treating with his family because he had younger siblings. And this is where our families were supposed to meet, but he didn't end up coming to my neighborhood, which I was super happy about. Well, then fast forward to my birthday. Our families were supposed to meet again, but it didn't end up happening again. And I wasn't really sure if this was the reason why things got weird between him and I. The one night I was over at my friend's house and Jose's on FaceTime with me. And I was talking about how I could pick him up and him and I could hang out. And he literally just didn't even say anything. So I was like, okay, is that a no? So then he was like, I don't know, I might be busy, blah, 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 like for part 3. Story time about why I will never go on a date ever again. So a little background information, I was 20 years old and I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship. Now, I had just gotten out of this relationship like a month before I went on this date. And I had absolutely no intentions of looking for a guy, but I was up for, flirting with them and going on some dates. Well, the one day I am at the gym in my apartment building, and there's this guy who's walking on the treadmill next to me, and I get off, and he gets off at the same time, and he starts up a conversation with me, and we had started talking about how I never went jet skiing. And he was like, oh, well, do you want to go jet skiing on Tuesday? So I just decided to put myself out there. I said yes, and bam, we had a date the next day. So I meet him at his car, and we go on this date. He did end up paying, which was very nice. But anyways, we're on the jet ski, and we're in the middle of the water. I was kind of weirded out because I didn't think that we would have to be that close with each other. Like for part 2. Part 4 about how my best friend made my entire school hate me. So like I said, Layla and Ivy talked my boyfriend into breaking up with me the week that I was suspended. They showed him fake text messages between me and some guy that doesn't even exist. And then they also faked a conversation between Layla and I, and it's me saying, OMG, this guy's so hot, I'm gonna leave my boyfriend for him. And I was getting called a cheater, and when I went back to school the next week on Monday, it was terrible. People would whisper and laugh at me when I was walking in the hallway. I would be in the bathroom and there would be girls talking about how weird and disgusting I was loud enough so I could hear them. Every lunch table that I sat at, Layla and Ivy would sit at the other end with all their friends and just talk about me the entire time. Well, after this situation, I finally decided that I was going to do online school for the next 2 months and then hopefully have a fresh start in high school. All the girls and I were changing in the locker room and we went to gym class. Ivy asked if she could go to the bathroom, which of course was in the locker room. After gym class, I get changed in my clothes. And all the girls start laughing at me when my teacher says, there's a hole in the back of your pants. And yes, I did try telling my teachers about this stuff that was going on. As we all should know by now, schools are notorious for not doing shit to help students that are being bullied. Okay, so story time about how my girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend. Come on, ladies, it's not supposed to be us. This is unacceptable. Okay, so a little background information. I was 17 and in 9th grade. Now, I also lived on my own because when I came out to my parents, they pretty much just kicked me to the curb whenever I was in 7th grade. But here's the thing, right? My girlfriend and my best friend had a hate-hate relationship. Like, they could not fucking stand each other. So I thought. Anyways, they would fight about who would get to spend time with me on what days. It was ridiculous. I mean, other than that though, everything was good. Up until there was some very sus activity going on. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, I did low-key feel like my girlfriend was cheating on me because of the very obvious red flags that I just so happened to ignore, per usual. Anyways, sign number 1 should have been the fact that every time she was on her phone, she would make sure that her brightness was all the way down, and she would always kind of, turn it away from me whenever I would, be next to her. Well, now on to my best friend. All of a sudden, she has everybody and their mother trying to make plans for her, and she has no time for me at all. And I'm not gonna lie, you guys can call me dumb for this one.
This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life.
I was over my girlfriend's house the one day, and she has this one sweatshirt that she really likes. I really like it too. So I go to grab it, and it's not there, and I ask her where it is, and she's like, oh, my sister must have took it on vacation with her. So, I'm like, okay, I brush it off. Well, a few days later, I go over to my best friend's house, and she comes and opens the door, and y'all already know, she's wearing the sweatshirt.
Oh my god! Wow!
But because her and my girlfriend hated each other so much, I believed her when she told me that it was her boyfriend's.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is the part where it kind of seems like I'm intentionally being delusional.
Too damn bad!
So the one day I go over to my girlfriend's house and I look over by her closet and I see this weird looking case on the ground. Now, my best friend would wear fake lashes, okay? And she had a case that she would put them in and she wrote her initials on the bottom. So I go over there, I grab it and I'm like, what's this? And she's like, I don't know. And then I'm like, I didn't know you wear lashes. And then she goes, I don't, they're probably yours. Like, girl, I think I would know if these are mine. Anyways, I turn the case over and what do you know? It is my best friend's initials, but they're super faded. Well, I would say what finally snapped me out of that fucking delusion that I was in was the one day whenever my girlfriend came over to my house and she had just got done with basketball practice. So she went to go and take a shower. I took it upon myself to go through her phone. Like, I was tired of playing these games with her because girlie was acting sus and I had to figure out what the was going on. Well, good thing I did because the shit that I found, whew, when I went through her phone, I saw that her and my best friend had been each other, sending nudes and everything else. So I took screenshots of everything and I'm just gonna put this out here right now. I am that bitch who's so fucking extra. Like, do not play with me, please do not. So with that being said, you guys want to know what I did? Did I confront them about it? No. Did I send the videos and pictures of them to their parents? No. Instead, I printed out over 100 packets with all of these pictures and text messages and I stapled them all together very neatly and then I handed them out to the whole school. And then I gave them to their parents. Because you guys want to be messy, we can be messy.
I had to double it.
Obviously, after this, I break up with Ashley. I don't even think I really needed to break up with her at that point. I think that it was already implied that that's what was happening. I haven't seen either of them since that whole situation. Oh, and I also heard that they got into a ton of trouble with their parents. Also, I kind of screwed up Ashley's social life. Not kind of, I did. Because Ashley was one of those people that everybody liked, but I guess not anymore. Karma's a bitch, but I'm worse. So next time you want to play games, play with your mama, not me. Story time about why you should be careful about who you go on vacation with. So a little background information, I was 18 years old and a senior in high school, and I had planned to go on a vacation to Barcelona in Europe with my best friend Kayla and this other girl Megan. Now, we didn't know Megan too well, but we were still friends with her. But I'm not gonna lie, the red flags started before we even left to go to Barcelona. Because as we were booking this trip, Kayla and I wanted to keep a smaller budget because we were going to be leaving for college when we got back. But Megan was not having it at all. She wanted to spend what seemed like every single last penny on this trip. But thankfully, we ended up compromising on a cheap Airbnb in the middle of Budapest. Well, fast forward to whenever we all land in Spain. So we go to the bar and we meet these two British guys. One's name was Will, and he was hanging around with Kayla and I. Then the other one, who we're gonna call Harry, he was chatting it up with Megan. Keep in mind, Megan has a boyfriend. So before we left, the guys asked for our Instagram, and Kayla and I said no, they respected it, but Megan, on the other hand, was giving out her socials. Now, initially, we weren't judging her because you can be friends with guys and have a boyfriend. Next night, we decided to hit the clubs again because literally every night there was crazy. We meet these guys. They were super cool, and one's name was Rylan and the other one's name was Ellis. Rylan was hitting on Megan, and Ellis was totally into me, which I didn't mind because he was so cute. And while we're all hanging out, Megan has the audacity to turn to me and be like, oh my god, I would totally do the nasty with Ellis if I didn't have a boyfriend. Meanwhile, she knew that I was interested in him. Anyways, so the rest of the night, Ellis and I basically spent it together. We exchanged socials, and Megan was super drunk, so we ended up going home. And then Megan decides to call her man while she's in the bed with Kayla, and we all sleep in one room so we can hear everything that the other person's doing. And then she starts having phone, you know what, with her man while she's in the bed with Kayla. And she's taking nude pics of herself and sending them while she's in the bed. Kayla felt extremely uncomfortable. Anyways, fast forward to the next day. Ellis and I hang out again, and we ended up kissing at the end of the night. And Megan was blackout drunk again, but this time on the way home, not only had she been flirting with so many guys, but she was trying to get with Ellis right in front of me. We ended up going to their apartments afterward, and literally, Megan invites him into bed with her. He didn't didn't get into bed with her, but I was so pissed off. Like, you have a boyfriend, and also you're trying to steal some guy that you know that I like. Kayla and I were furious, so we just decided to go and walk home. Fast forward the next day, Megan wakes up and she can't remember anything that happened the day before. After this, the vibe was just awful, but Kayla and I tried to ignore it, and I'm pretty sure that Megan had no idea that there was a bad vibe. Like, I'm pretty sure that she thought nothing she did was wrong. Anyway, so we go to this beach party thing, and Megan was in charge of booking the beach party, right? Kayla and I gave her money to book tickets that was unlimited drinking. What did she do? She did not book the unlimited drinking package. She booked the regular one. Anyway, so Megan starts flirting with this 30-year-old man, and that's whenever Kayla and I decide, okay, we're gonna go walk around because we're not staying here for this. Like, this is our vacation too. Anyways, we make our way back over to Megan, and she looks pissed. She was so mad that we weren't staying with her while she talked to this old man, and we were like, we never even let you out of our sight. Like, we were barely 10 feet away from you, but we're sorry. She was like, yeah, it's the least that you can do after your behavior. And I'm like, what the fuck? So then all of us are arguing on the beach, and usually I'm the one who is very feisty, but Kayla went off. I have never seen her like this ever in my life, because Megan thought that she could just go off on us and we were gonna stand there and say nothing. So then she orders a cab and we offer to get in it with her, but she says no, and we stayed and we had a really good night. Because one, this is our vacation too, and we are nobody's babysitters. We tried to make sure that you were having a good time, and we took care of you while you were blackout drunk, and you were not about to treat us like shit. Moral of the story, know who you're going on vacation with before you go on vacation. Part 2 about how I got catfished by my ex-boyfriend. So like I said, after I confront him about this, he decides that he's going to flip out on me, victimize himself, of course. So him and I end up breaking up, and then 5 months later, I meet this really cute guy on Snapchat. And you know, him and I are talking for a while, and of course I start to catch feelings. And then bam, him and I start dating. Now, I'm not even going to beat around the bush with this one. I was willing to date anybody because I was lonely. The next day, whenever I go to school, Jake keeps smiling at me and tries to talk to me, but I'm ignoring him because what the fuck? Well, over the next 2 days, my new boyfriend starts acting like a total jerk. He starts asking me for nudes 24/7. He never wanted to talk to me. Well, the one day him and I were having a really good day, and I decided to send them to him. And then a week later, Jack walks up to me and shows me my pictures. And he's like, if you don't do the nasty with me, I'm posting these everywhere. Now, my parents are super strict and I didn't want them seeing it, so I did it with him. And he ended up posting them everywhere and then telling everybody that we did the nasty. Storytime about my toxic foster family. So, little background information. Whenever this all happened, I was 19 years old and I was already out of school. But I had been adopted by a family whenever I was 16 years old. And at this point, they had been fostering my brother for about a year. So the only things that they knew about me is whatever my brother told them. Whenever I was 17, my sister ended up passing away, and I went into a really deep depression where I would wake up and go to sleep crying for months on end. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty neglected. Like, my family would get $800 to $1,000 every month for me, and I never saw a dime of that money, let alone we would only go shopping probably once a year for clothes. And I never really got to go out. Well, when I went to them about being depressed, they said that if I didn't feel okay after vacation, they would get me help. Well, they lied because it got worse and they didn't really care. Everybody was getting paid to do chores except for me, and I literally had so much more to do than everybody else in the house. And then I got a boyfriend, like for part 2. Storytime about how my best friend was a snake. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. And I've been best friends with this girl who we're going to call Callie since 5th grade. Well, fast forward to 8th grade, there was this guy in my class that I really liked. And obviously I told Callie about it because, like, duh, she is my best friend. And she has never talked to this boy. She never even knew who he was before I had told her about him. And by the way, we're going to call him Jake. Well, eventually him and I started talking and she was hyping us up. Like, she really wanted us to be together so bad. And I was really feeling the love and support. Well, not long after that, I had to move to another town for like 3 months because of my dad. So Jake and I, we stopped talking after me being gone for like 2 weeks. And of course, not long after that, one of my friends from home texted me. And she's like, hey, you know Callie and that guy that you were talking to, right? AKA Jake. Obviously, I say yes. Like for part 2. Part 2, is blood thicker than water? Metaphorically speaking, of course. So like I said, my sister started spending more time at my boyfriend's house. I thought that she was lonely, but then my boyfriend started acting weird and all the signs pointing to him cheating on me. But I ignored it because I thought that him and I were in love like in the movies. And also, if I broke up with him, it would be like breaking up with his family because I loved them like my own. Fast forward, his sister ends up getting married and my sister and I were invited to the wedding. Fast forward, everybody gets drunk. We end up spending the night at his cousin's house and something was off with my boyfriend. He wasn't really talking to me. He wouldn't touch me. He pretty much acted like he was done with me. Well, then there's my sister who was flirting and touching him like it was normal. Fast forward a month, I asked my sister if anything happened between them and she goes, I think we slept together. So I confronted him about it and he just laughs and he's like, it wasn't that serious. So I end up breaking up with him and then I start finding unhealthy ways to cope, aka drinking. And eventually I got so lonely to the point where I forgave my sister. And then I started seeing this other guy and he was amazing. Like for part 3. Part 2 about my weird cellmate. So like I said, I asked her if she unalived someone before, because only somebody who unalived somebody would be triggered over us watching true crime, but she completely ignores me. So the first night, something happened with this girl. It was low-key, very, very weird. Me and my other cellmates were like, this girl's weird as hell. Why is she here? And then the next day was the icing on the cake. So it was cleaning day, and we're all cleaning our stuff. And this girl just starts cleaning the weirdest things, like the inside of trash cans and shit that didn't need to be cleaned. And then it started getting creepy. Not weird, creepy. She put a paper towel over the drains because the voices were too loud. And then she would walk around the pod talking about death and carnage. And if you don't know what carnage means, it pretty much just means unaliving a lot of people. So this was super bad vibes, obviously. Now when you're in jail, of course people are going to ask what you're doing time for. And if you don't say, you're going to come off as sketchy. So we're asking this girl, hey, what are you in for? And she would not give us a straight answer. Well, while she was at a visit, we went through her things, like for part story time about my boyfriend's girl best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade, and my boyfriend Jaden and I have been together for 2 years. In the beginning, everything was great, and then we went over to his best friend's house, which I didn't realize that his best friend was a girl. And at first I liked her. Her name was Anita, and she was super funny, super nice. Well, fast forward, it started to become a routine where he would drop me off at my house, and then I would call him, and he wouldn't pick up until like the 3rd time that I called him, and then he would be like, what's up? I'm hanging out with Anita. And I felt super weird, because while we were on the phone together, him and Anita were in the car just talking to each other, not even acknowledging me. So then the one day I asked him if him and I could hang out, and he said that he wasn't going to bring Anita. Well, he pulls up, and guess who's sitting in the back seat? Anita. And they were playing sexual songs, which made me feel super uncomfortable. And she didn't say one word to Jaden the whole time, but she had so much to say to him while we were on the phone. Like for part 2. Storytime about how my ex-boyfriend stole all my shit and then gave it to his new girlfriend. So a little background information, I was 23 and I had been dating this guy who we're gonna call Derek for 2 years. Now, at first I thought that our relationship was perfect. Of course, you guys know how it goes. But then the one day he came home from work and he told me that he had been cheating on me throughout our whole relationship. He literally had a full-on relationship the past 2 years that him and I were supposed to be together with another girl. But yeah, he came home from work and he told me, listen, I don't want to be with you. I really love her. You know, it's just not working out. So obviously I go and I find her social media and I tell her and she just blocks me. She literally just blocks me. And then he told me that she knew that he was also dating me at the same time. So whatever, fast forward, you know, he moves out, he moves in with her, and he is slowly moving his stuff out of my apartment. Like, it literally took him 4 months to get all of his stuff out of my apartment. Anyway, so the one day he calls me while I'm at work, and he's like, hey, can I come get the keys? I need to get some of my stuff. So obviously this had been going on the past 4 months, so I was like, yeah, just come pick the keys up. So he does, like for part 2. Storytime about why I hate Valentine's Day. So a little background information, I was 22 years old, and I had been dating this guy for almost a year. And we're gonna call him Jimmy. Most of Jimmy and I's relationship had been long distance because literally after 2 months of us dating, he was offered a job in a different state. And I never worried about him cheating on me or anything like that because he seemed like a really honest and genuine guy. But of course I was wrong because he said that he couldn't do anything for Valentine's Day because he had to work. So me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm just gonna fly to him, you know, so we can spend Valentine's Day together. And it'll be a nice surprise. So a few days before Valentine's Day, I get my plane ticket and I wanted to do something special, so I wore some nice lingerie under a trench coat. Well, fast forward, my plane lands and I get an Uber to his apartment. And when I knock on his door, I hear a woman's voice from inside saying, don't worry, I'll get the door. Like for part 2. Storytime about why my sister is probably worse than yours. So a little background information, my sister and I were both 16 and in our sophomore year of high school. And yes, my sister and I were twins, but we were the complete opposite. She was a girly girl and I was a tomboy. But the summer before our sophomore year, we both got grounded because we were driving my dad's car without our license and we wrecked it. So we ended up spending all summer together, which was very unusual because it was like her and I were acquaintances living in the same house. Well, over that summer, we got super close and she ended up turning me into a girly girl. She taught me how to take care of my skin, do my hair, do my makeup, and how to dress. Now, mind you, once we got into high school, she never spoke to me because I wasn't a part of the little clique that she was in. So she was like, yay, you can finally hang out with my friends and I'm super excited. So school starts, I end up becoming friends with all of her friends, and my sister's really good friends with this one boy. But she had always said that she never liked him like that. So she introduced us, him and I started talking, and we both ended up liking each other. Like for part 2. Storytime about how I caught my teachers doing the nasty in the girls' bathroom. So a little background information, I was 14 years old and in 9th grade, and we're just gonna get straight into it. So the one day while I was at school, I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom, and as I'm walking up towards the bathroom, you know how school bathrooms or any public bathroom in general, like it echoes? Yeah, well, as I got closer to the bathroom, I hear quiet grunting and heavy breathing. But of course, I thought that someone was just going number 2, okay? I did not think anything of this because duh, what else would be happening in a school bathroom? Anyway, so like I said, I walk in not thinking anything of this, and then bam, I see my history and biology teacher doing it in the open stall. The open stall. Like, come on guys, it is bad enough. Y'all are doing this in a public bathroom on school property where there are hundreds of minors walking around, but in the open stall, y'all need to have some class. So obviously when I see them, I like gasp. I'm like, oh, because walking into a school bathroom, that is not what I expect to see, nor do I want to see that. So then Mr. C hurries up, pulls his pants up, and then just sits on the toilet. And then my bio teacher, Miss Annabelle, she turns like bright red and she's trying to cover herself, her whole body with her hands, like girly pop. We already established that this is very immoral / disgusting / downright foul as f***. But you really just have to take all of your clothes off. All of them. Not only that, but Miss Annabelle over here is f***ing married. Like, girl, shame on you. Anyway, so for some reason, the first thing that I thought to say was, I'm gonna tell your husband, even though I knew I wasn't gonna do shit. But it's literally the only thing that I could think to say in this moment. Well then, Mr. C jumps off the damn toilet, and you guys will never guess what his first thought to do is. Is it to try to de-escalate the situation? No. Is it to try to bribe me? No. Guess again. Run? Never mind, I'm just gonna f***ing tell you. He turns to her and starts crying. Not about the fact that his ass was about to be fired. No. Instead, he's like, do you love me?
Be fucking for real.
She did not seem to give a fuck about him, which go off sis because you need to be more worried about how you're gonna pay them bills without a job. Anyway, so yeah, you know, she's hurrying up, putting her clothes on, he's crying, and then finally they both direct their attention towards me, and then they corner me and start threatening me. They're like, if you tell anybody about this, we're gonna make sure that we make the rest of your high school experience a living hell, blah, 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 this, that, and the next. Like, okay, fight for the bag. But at the same time, y'all keep digging yourselves a deeper grave. I mean, shit, like, you do you, but at the same time, like, girl and sir, get it together. Anyway, so as a freshman, like, I'm scared as like, I didn't know what that meant, and I was not about to find out. So, obviously, I tell them what they want to hear, and then finally they leave, and my crybaby ass starts having a fucking panic attack. Okay, actually though, like, I'm not a crybaby. I was just threatened by 2 grown-ass adults. Also, I wasn't even sure if anybody would believe me. But then I did remember that this is school, and there are cameras everywhere, because duh, it's the 21st century, and we have weirdos and psychos out here doing shit they're not supposed to do. Cough, cough, Miss Annabelle and Mr. C. Anyway, so I'm crying the whole walk back to class, and when I walked in, the teacher ran over and she's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? What happened? And then I asked her if we could talk outside because I did not want to say what I just saw in front of the whole class. Also, I was low-key hesitant to tell anybody because Miss Annabelle had 3 kids and a husband, so I didn't want to rip her family apart. But then again, I decided not to give a because sis should have thought about them kids before she chose dick over them. Yeah, anyways. So then after I tell her, she immediately gets a teacher to cover the class and she takes me to the guidance office. Could y'all imagine if this teacher was friends with those other teachers? Like, I wonder if this teacher still would have told anybody else what happened. Cause you know how like you want to save your friends sometimes, you know, Captain Save-A-Ho type shit. Anyway, so they called both of them down and I had to tell the whole situation again in front of them. Thankfully, security stood next to me because I was scared shitless from the threats that they made towards me. Well, baby, the cameras do not lie. They were caught in 4K doing shit they weren't supposed to be doing. After this, both of them were fired and my parents decided to take me out of that school because they were not very thrilled at the fact that I was threatened by 2 teachers. Part 2 about how my boyfriend was dating some other girl and myself at the same time. So like I said, he's clearly been Snapchatting this girl a lot. So then I asked him if it's this Bailey girl that we actually knew, and he was like, no, this is Bailey Moore. That other Bailey is disgusting. Like, okay, what the fuck is so special about this one? Just kidding, not really. So now I'm super annoyed and cannot get this girl out of my head because he didn't even try to explain who she was or why she had any significance in his life at all. So fast forward to spring break. He told me that whenever we got back from vacation, he wanted me to meet his parents, which I was so happy about because our relationship is finally progressing. But then I remember that he's supposed to go to his hometown's prom with some other girl, of course. So I decided to look up this Bailey girl just to see where she's from, and what do you know, she's from his hometown. So fast forward, I ended up getting in trouble for going out and getting drunk, and my parents took my phone away, and then they went through it, and they found out that Tyler and I were doing the nasty, so they grounded me. And they were like, you can tell Tyler that he can text or call us if he wants to talk to you. I didn't get any text the whole entire time that I was grounded. So fast forward a whole week, I finally text him, like for part 3. Storytime about how I got away with sleeping with my best friend's brother without her knowing. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade, and we're going to call my best friend's brother Jake. Now, I've always felt like I had a connection with Jake, but I didn't know what kind of connection, so I just ignored it. But I was super close with their mom, and I kind of thought of her as my own. And I would always be over their house because my parents were always fighting, so I knew exactly where they hid their spare key. Anyways, so this night, my parents have been fighting, and I was texting with Jake. And Jake was like, oh, well, you should just come over and we'll hang out. And I said no because I didn't want to upset my best friend. But him and I were still texting throughout the night, and I finally decided to go over their house. I ended up falling asleep in my best friend's room, and then fast forward, I wake up at 3 a.m. So I go to the bathroom, and what are the chances her brother is in there? As he walks out, I walk in, and somehow we both ended up in the bathroom together, and we did the nasty. After that, I went back to bed, and nobody ever found out. Storytime about how my best friend got my house raided. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade, and we're gonna call my best friend Jenna. Jenna and I have been on and off friends since elementary school. Now, the reason why we were on and off friends was because Jenna was the type of person who ended up in drama all the time. And coincidentally, anytime that I would stop being her friend, I would be in no drama. Now, there have been multiple times where I've tried to break off our friendship for good, but Jenna, of course, was the type of girl who would threaten to unalive herself whenever things didn't go her way. And I low-key have a savior complex. Also, I literally lived right across the street from her. So it was very hard to cut this friendship off. Well, anyways, fast forward, so her and I are friends, which also wasn't good because she was a very bad influence on me. For example, I didn't have a driver's license, but I had a car. So of course I would go pick her up and her and I would fuck shit up together, aka do bad things. Well, the one night I let her drive and she ended up going to my ex-boyfriend's house like for Storytime about my weird cellmate. So a little background information, I was 17 years old and a junior in high school. Yes, I was 17 and I was being charged as an adult, so I was in with a bunch of women. Well, one night after dinner, my cellmates and I are watching true crime shows, because that's what you do when you're in jail, watch true crime and CSI and all that shit. Anyway, so we're watching our shows and we see a new girl come in. She's got her blanket packed and we're all being warm and welcoming. And immediately, all of us could sense that something was off with this chick. Immediately, she starts going off about how she has a problem with the TV show we're watching. She did not like the fact that we were watching crime shows. She was like, oh my gosh, you guys really need to turn this off like right now. Low-key thought I was gonna see her on there or some shit. But yeah, she was just being super paranoid and we're sitting there like, girl, we have 10 channels. 7 of them are going to be true crime and 2 of them are the news. Oh, and the other channel was black and white movies and nobody wanted to watch that shit. So then I asked her if she unalived someone, life apart. Storytime about how my boyfriend was hiding his 2-year relationship from me. So a little background information, I was 18 and a senior in high school. And in the middle of the school year, I had a new student in my 4th period class who we're going to call Jose, and he was 17 years old and in 11th grade. Now, he wasn't technically new because I'd seen him around school and everything like that, but up until this point, neither of us knew that each other existed. So he gets introduced to the class, blah, blah, blah. He sits in the very back of the room, and I knew that this man was going to be my boyfriend. So when I got home that day, I was texting my friend about him. Thankfully, she gave me his Snapchat. Fast forward, we're talking, and elevators get brought up. Now, in my school, you are not allowed to use the elevators unless you're injured or for some other reason. Well, he was talking about how he always used the elevators and nobody really cared. So I meet him at the elevator the next day and blah, blah, blah. We start flirting. And this led to him and I being super close. Like, we would FaceTime every day. We would always sit together at lunch, in class. Like for part 2. Story time about how my baby daddy ruined my pregnancy. So a little background information. I was 18 years old and I had just graduated high school. After my ex and I broke up, that's when I met my baby daddy, who we are going to call Mark. He had graduated high school the year before my freshman year in high school. So there was quite a bit of an age gap. I always had a little bit of a crush on him, but I never thought anything of it because he was literally a senior in high school while I was in middle school. So one day him and I hang out and I decided that I was not going to do the nasty with him because I did not want to get ghosted right away after. Been there, done that. But sadly, this is easier said than done. 2 weeks later, him and I are still doing the nasty and talking when all of a sudden he says, I think we should slow things down.
Wait, who?
Like, oh, okay, now you think we should slow things down. Pretty sure that seems a little ass backwards, but okay. Sure, bud. A week later, my stepmom and I are talking, and I low-key let it slip that my period was late.
Oh, hell no.
And not just like a day or two late, 5 days late.
Go home and get the gun.
So, you know, we stop at the nearest convenience store and we pick up a pregnancy test. I take the test and then she gave me a hug, reassuring me that everything was going to be okay. All I could do was cry because, as I said earlier, I'm only 18 years old. I just graduated high school. I felt like all of those plans that I had for myself in the future were just ripped out of my hands, crumpled up, thrown in the trash, and lit on fire. So my parents end up taking me to Mark's house. I show him the pregnancy test and all of a sudden he starts freaking out. So then he tells me it's up to me whether I want to keep it or not. Like, yeah, I know. And we start to Google where I can go to get an abortion because guess what? Just guess. Where do I live? Texas. And what was my luck? Texas had just overturned Roe v. Wade the week before. And it would be expensive to travel somewhere. So obviously we decided not to do that either. Well, fast forward to November, my birthday month,
Girl, shut the fuck up.
Anyway, so like I said, fast forward to November. So one day I'm at work and earlier Mark had told me that he was going to go to his brother's house. And since I was at work, I didn't care until, dun dun dun, one of my friends, my work friends, convinced me to check and see if he was where he said he was. I swear, it's always the work friends that have like the best intuition. Like if they tell you your man is cheating, he's probably cheating. And I'm not gonna lie, you know, something was a little bit sus about the fact that he was going to hang out with his nephew super late. Yeah, shit just like low-key wasn't adding up. I drive past his brother's house and what do you know? He isn't there.
Don't be shocked. You're shocked? You're shocked?
So now I'm blowing this motherfucker's phone up. After what feels like forever, he finally answers the damn phone. And I'm like, hey, I know you're not at your brother's house. Where the fuck are you? And he confesses to being at this girl Hannah's house. He is swearing up and down that nothing happened with this girl Hannah.
You lying? Yeah.
I believe him. I let it go because he tells me that he loves me and he wants to make things work.
Dumbass bitch.
So 4 days later, while he's at work, I realized that this tool bag left his Apple Watch at home and that hoe had "go through me bitch" written all over it. So what did I do? I went through that shit and I found some very raunchy text messages between him and Hannah. They had been talking about how much they wanted each other and he had gotten mad at her for not wanting to do the nasty with him. On the screen are the receipts. I go psycho. After I confront him, he begs me not to leave him. And you know, he swears he'll never do it again. He lied.
Got him!
Turns out that he had been asking other girls for nudes and sending nudes to them. It caused my body so much stress that I literally had to have an emergency C-section due to how much stress my body and baby was under. Him and I aren't together anymore, but we still live in the same house. We actually sleep in separate bedrooms. He is an amazing father, but as a significant other, absolutely not. That man is garbage. Storytime about how I unintentionally almost drowned my sister. So a little background information, I was 8 years old and my sister was 5. And during the summer, my sister and I never really got to go swimming because pool memberships were really expensive and my family did not want to take us to a public pool. So every summer we would go to my grandpa's house so that way we could go swimming. But he lived like 2 hours away, so we would only go there once a summer. And since we only got to go swimming this one time, we would usually be in the pool 24/7. So fast forward, we're all at my grandpa's house, and I finished my dinner first, so I run outside and I put my sister's floaties on because I'm pretty sure that mine actually popped. Now, quick thing, we were allowed to go into the pool without floaties on if we stayed in the shallow end of the pool because we couldn't swim for shit. Anyway, so I put her floaties on and I go to the deep end and she comes outside like a bat out of hell, and she starts screaming and crying, and being the big sister I am, I'm just swimming around, ignoring her, enjoying my time in the pool, like for part 2. Part 2 about my toxic foster family. So like I said, everybody else in the house really had no chores to do, and they would get paid for whatever the hell they did, even if it was like pick up a dime off the floor. Meanwhile, I was like Cinderella, cleaning the whole house, not getting paid for shit, and then I get a boyfriend who was super caring and acknowledged the fact that I was super emotionally and physically beat down. And the worst part is, I just want to throw this in here, my biological brother was literally no help. When I came to him saying that I was depressed, he was like, oh, you're too sensitive. And then he would literally stalk me 24/7, always knew where I was at, always was making my life even harder than it had to be. So the one morning I got up and I just decided to leave. And then after that, for 1 year straight, I got harassed with emails. I would get tailgated on the freeway. And even though I got away from them, I'm still kind of scared that my biological brother will do something. So yeah. Part 2 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with 10 other girls. So like I said, this man begs me to get married to him before he leaves. And thank goodness I didn't, because divorce papers would have been served the same day. So fast forward, he starts acting super weird. He's going out 24/7. He's getting drunk. He's not wearing the ring that he begged me to get him. Yes, he literally begged me for a ring so that way women would know that he had a girlfriend. Well, then of course I get a DM from a girl on Instagram asking if him and I were still together. And then after talking to her, I realized he literally made a Tinder 2 days after he got deployed. And what was his excuse? Oh, I wanted to meet friends to teach me German. And listen, I was not born last night, so I kept that conversation going because I wanted to get to the bottom of what the fuck was actually going on. And then, of course, he finally comes clean that he cheated on me with a bunch of girls. Oh, and you want to know the icing on the cake? One of them was a minor. Yup. After I leave him, he has the audacity to ask for my ring back, but I threatened to tell Part 2 about how I got pregnant by my boyfriend's younger brother, and he still doesn't know. So, like I said, my boyfriend cheated on me with my cousin, and somehow that led to me hooking up with his younger brother. Well, fast forward, one day I realized that I haven't gotten my period in 2 months, so I took a pregnancy test and it came back positive, of course. And the first thing that I did was go to Josh's brother because him and I were hooking up way more than my boyfriend and I were within the past few months. Well, we both came to the conclusion that I should just tell my boyfriend that it's his and see what happens from there. So I told my boyfriend I'm pregnant and he was super happy, gave me this whole speech about how he's going to be a better boyfriend for me and the baby, which in simpler terms pretty much means, yay babe, I'm going to stop cheating on you since you're pregnant, but only because you're pregnant. So now my boyfriend is raising my 1-year-old daughter who he thinks is his, and I'm still hooking up with his brother. Storytime about how I got pregnant by my boyfriend's younger brother and he still doesn't know. So a little background information, I'm 19 years old and I'm in college. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for about 2 years and we're going to call him Josh. The 2 years that we've been dating have been super rocky because he would try to hook up with other girls. Well, no, actually he wouldn't try. He would hook up with other girls. And then, him and I would break up and then we would get back together. Just your usual toxic relationship. The main reason why I kept going back to him was because he was super popular. And this made me feel like I was never going to find anybody better than him, so on and so forth. Now, Josh's brother is 21 years old, and somehow, someway, him and I started hooking up. Right around after the time I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. Yes, my cousin. I'm saying that like I'm not hooking up with his brother. Anyways, Well, one day I realized that I haven't gotten my period in 2 months, so I took a pregnancy test, and it came back positive, like for part 2. Part 2 about how one of my best friends was blackmailing me. So like I said, he took some pictures and videos of me doing some stuff at my party, and then all of a sudden I get a message out of nowhere saying that I need to send him nude photos and do stuff for him physically, or else he was going to send these pictures to my parents, and the whole school literally blackmailed me. Now, of course, I didn't want my parents to find any of this crap out, so it became a regular thing between him and I, where I would send him pictures and then do stuff for him, and this went on for a while. Fast forward, thankfully, I'm about to graduate, and he doesn't blackmail me anymore since both of us don't want a serious relationship. I don't really know how that makes sense, but yeah. Part 2 about how this girl pretended to be my best friend just to go on vacation with me. So like I said, she had been flirting with this guy that she knew that I liked, and then she starts dressing like me and getting more popular, which I didn't really care because I was still her best friend. Mainly because she didn't really have any other friends. So fast forward, vacation comes around and we all go to Hawaii. We had the best time ever. And then we come home and I barely hear from her. Like, I was putting in all the effort, texting her every day, and her responses were dry as fuck. And then she had this boyfriend named Brendan, which I guess that could have been the reason why she wasn't talking to me as much. Because, you know, you get into a relationship and all of your focus goes towards that, especially at this age. But the only reason why she started dating him was because he was popular. So they break up and she stopped talking to me altogether. She even blocked me on Instagram. So I asked her what happened and she said that I was a controlling bitch and she didn't want to be friends with me, which doesn't even make any sense because I've never been controlling to her. And then she starts texting me like everything was okay, and this went on for a little bit. But after a few months, I just stopped talking to her, but I definitely felt used. Part 3 about how I came out to my super homophobic parents. So like I said, my mom was like, if you're a part of this community, you're going to need God and Jesus to protect you from me. And I was really upset. I started crying and my boyfriend, he's like comforting me. I finally decided to grow some balls and tell her that I was in fact a part of the community. Well, I ended up getting my ass beat. They also told me that they were going to take me to a priest to get an exorcism. So I basically moved out of my parents' house and I moved into my uncle's house, who's a part of the LGBTQ community. And he's in full support of my boyfriend and I's relationship. I blocked both of my parents and I haven't talked to them ever since I moved out. Well, that's a lie. The only time that I did talk to them was to wish them a happy Mother's Day and happy Father's Day. But other than that, I decided that I want to be happy, and to be happy, I had to keep them out of my life. Story time about how I came out to my homophobic parents. So a little background information, I was 14 or 15 and I was a freshman in high school. And all throughout middle school, I had been questioning my sexuality because I didn't really know what I was into, as do most kids my age. Well, due to this, I was bullied in school because people would always ask me, oh, do you like boys or girls? And when I would say that I don't know, they would call me slurs. So anytime that I got into a relationship, I would keep it a secret, and the only person that knew was my best friend. But the summer before my freshman year, I got together with my current boyfriend, and we're going to call him Andrew. Andrew and I met through Snapchat through a mutual friend. We started FaceTiming all the time, and we found out that we lived in the same area, so we started hanging out all the time as well. Well, eventually him and I started dating, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, we took our relationship a little bit further, and his parents knew that he was gay and that we were in a relationship. But my parents, on the other hand, did not know, like for part 2. Part 3 about how my boyfriend was seeing another girl behind my back. So like I said, I was talking to his friend, and his friend said that he's been talking to this girl for 2 to 3 weeks about the time that I've been gone. And he's been telling everybody about how he wants to break up with me for her. So of course I'm sad and crying, and I confront him and he says, oh, she's just a friend, blah, blah, blah. So I press the issue, and then he tells me that he lost feelings for me weeks ago. And that the reason why he didn't tell me was because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. Yet he led me on for 2 to 3 weeks. Like, how does that work, Alex? How? Anyway, so I blocked him because there's no way in hell that I'm going to keep talking to a guy that was making fun of me with his friends and telling everybody around him that he wanted to break up with me. That's embarrassing. Story time about how my boyfriend was seeing another girl behind my back. So a little background information, I was living with my dad and I had just started a new school, and I became really good friends with this group of kids. And in our friend group, there was this boy who we're going to call Alex. And him and I hit it off like right away. We had been talking for 2 months. And by the way, during this whole time, his friends were telling me how much he loved me and how much he wanted to be with me. So eventually him and I started dating. And of course, like any other tragic love story, I had to move far away because I had to go live with my mom, blah, 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 blah. But since I would visit my dad for the holidays, him and I would still be able to see each other sometimes, which is pretty good for a long distance relationship, especially when you're in school. So I told him about how I had to move, And he was really sad, but he said that I can trust him. Red flag number 1, because why would you say that in the first place? There should be no reason on why I have to, quote, trust you to be loyal when I'm away. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why you should never get romantically involved with someone that you work with. So like I said, he just started acting really weird towards me. Like he just woke up one day and decided that he hated me. He starts threatening to write me up, and then he starts talking down to me any chance that he got. And I'm not going to take that from a grown man who's been hanging out with a teenager. So I end up having to meet with the head of HR. And they told me they had to let me go because I'm, quote, hostile, disrespectful, and this, that, and the next. Obviously, I knew that he went to HR because they didn't just pull this shit out of their ass. So I texted him the same day and I told him that I was going to call corporate and let them know everything that had been going on between him and I. I don't think that he believed me, but I sent in a report about the whole situation. And of course, whenever the head of HR confronted him about it, he denied everything. So I called corporate again and I sent them all the proof that this actually happened. And currently, I'm still waiting for him to get fired because there is no way in hell that you're going to get me fired and have no consequences whatsoever. Part 3 is blood thicker than water. Metaphorically speaking, of course. So like I said, I forgave my sister, and then I got a new guy. He was amazing, and then my sister started begging to hang out with us. Now, of course, you would have thought that I learned from the first time, but I did not. I just completely ignored the signs that God gave me that she was a bad person. Okay, I guess not a bad person, she just didn't give a fuck about my feelings. Well, the one weekend his parents went away and they needed him to house sit, so he invited me over to house sit with him, and then guess who tags along? My sister. I mean, I guess I could have told her that she couldn't come, but at the same time, I was trying to be a forgiving person, okay? And I thought that she wouldn't do this shit to me again. Well, I was wrong because on the last night of house sitting, we all decided that we were gonna get drunk. And my sister made sure that I got more effed up than everybody else. I ended up actually getting alcohol poisoning and I almost died. But she didn't care. She was too focused on sleeping with the new guy. The worst part of this is they started dating and my mom was on her side. It's been 3 years and I'm still trying to forgive her and my Storytime, is blood really thicker than water? Metaphorically speaking, of course. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and I was in 10th grade. And I had just started dating this guy that my friends introduced me to. He was extremely attractive, really smart, and really kind. Literally had all the traits a girl could want in a boyfriend. So him and I are talking for a while, and then we start dating, and we were amazing together. And my sister had just came back home from teaching in Thailand. Surprisingly, her and I got super close because we always used to fight with each other. And now we were inseparable. The only issue was she was 25 years old acting like a child. She always wanted to be at my boyfriend's house with him and his family. Weird, I know. Anyway, so she was always over there with them and I thought that maybe she was just lonely. Wrong, of course. Now, of course, like any other relationship, mine wasn't perfect, but my boyfriend and I started having more problems than usual when my sister showed up. He was being super weird and all the signs pointed to him cheating on me. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, no license, but I had a car and I let her drive that night. And she went to my ex-boyfriend's house. Now, her and him used to be close whenever him and I were dating. And I didn't think anything of it until she called him and she kept telling him to come outside of his house so we could fight him. And I'm telling her to stop, but she just keeps laughing the whole time and she always does shit like this. And I was tired of being pulled into shit like this because then I got named the psycho stalker girl. So then I find out that after she went home that night, she texted my ex with this whole elaborate story about how I was the one who made her drive to his house and say all that shit. So fast forward, her and I got into it at school because I told a counselor that she was threatening to unalive herself because I was really worried for her. But then she starts posting stuff about my mental health on social media, saying things like, oh, she has zebra stripe arms. And I fought her after that. Because the only reason why I told our counselor is because I gave a shit about her mental health, like for part 3. Storytime about why my aunt put me back into foster care. Yes, she put me back into foster care. So a little background information, I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. But whenever I was 12 years old, I was in a very abusive household. And I had 2 younger sisters, one was 11 and the other one was 9. Fast forward, all of us were put into foster care. I got placed into many shelters / group homes because of my behavioral issues. While I was going through all of this, my sisters were both in study homes, so that kind of sucked. I mean, I was happy for them, but at the same time, I was going through hell. But eventually, my grandma and my dad passed away, so my aunt decided that she wanted my sisters and I. So she got her foster license, and the days leading up to whenever we were supposed to move in with her were absolute garbage. There was this one girl who was 19 years old. Her and I did not get along, and I was supposed to leave that Wednesday, but I didn't want to wait, so I decided that I was going to get myself kicked out in hopes that I would be able to move in with my aunt sooner. Like for part 2. Part 3 about my weird cellmate. So like I said, we asked her what she was in for and she didn't answer, so we found that weird as heck. So then she went for a visit and we searched through her stuff and found her paperwork. We found out that she was in because she attempted to unalive her husband, in which he got a restraining order. So at this point, we're like, this is weird as hell and she needs to go. Like, she gotta go. So now the entire pod comes together and every single one of us wrote a letter pleading the staff to get this crazy you-know-what out of our pod. We all folded them up into little paper kites and we sent them to the guards. We were ringing the doorbell like crazy and we told them what happened and no questions asked, she was gone. Part 2 about my toxic ex-best friend. I think we left off on sign number 3, which was the only time that we would talk was when it was convenient for him. He would never reach out, which left me being the one who was constantly trying to preserve our friendship or whatever was left of it. Like, all of our messages were literally me, and it made me seem really needy, and like I was putting in way too much effort because he would literally answer with the most simple messages. Like, yeah, okay. Sure. And he would only talk to me whenever he wasn't with his friends. Sign number 4. It felt like he was embarrassed of me. Now, I know that I was 2 years younger than him, but we were still friends, and I really don't think that's that much of a difference. Like, he would never want to be seen with me. The last sign, he would literally always talk about me behind my back. And I thought this was just rumors at first, until finally several people told me that it was not a rumor. He would say things like, oh, she's ugly, she's so immature, she's annoying and childish, she's so annoying. And then I finally decided to cut him off. Because if the bad outweighed the good, was it really worth keeping that person in my life? Part 3 about how my boyfriend was hiding his 2-year relationship from me. So like I said, him and I are on FaceTime. I'm asking him if he wants to hang out and he's being super weird about it, being super standoffish. Well, fast forward a little bit, he seemed like he wasn't interested in me anymore and it really hurt my feelings, obviously. So he didn't talk to me the rest of the day and then he texted me the next day. And he was telling me how different we are and how we barely have anything in common and how we rushed into things. Pretty much a bunch of shitty excuses as to why he thinks that we should break up. Well, after that, him and I don't speak for a few days, and then I had a fake account on Instagram, and after our breakup, I viewed his story the one day. So then I look at his Instagram story, he posted a picture of another girl with a heart, and then I found her account, and she had pictures of them dating back from like 2 years ago. Now, still to this day, I don't know if he was cheating on her or if they were on a break or whatever, but I also thought that it was weird that they were dating because she was 19 and he was 17. Part 2 about my boyfriend's girl best friend. So, like I said, he said that he wasn't going to bring Anita with him, and then he pulls up and guess who's in the car? So, fast forward 8 months, Jaden and I are doing super good, and the one day we're driving around, and he mentions that he has to pick someone up. Yep, Anita, and her friend. So, fast forward, we picked them up, and I was feeling super uncomfortable and pissed off. Because Anita's, like, rubbing his shoulders and stuff like that, and then they drop me off at my house. Well, not even 10 minutes later, they get into a car crash. Literally 10 minutes down the street from me, so the girls walk to my house. So we're sitting in the garage, and the girls are talking about how long they've known Jaden for, blah, 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 this and that. And how he drives super careful when Anita's in the car because he really cares about her. So I told Jaden that I'm not okay with him hanging out with Anita. And of course, when I text him, he's drinking with Anita. So then he starts calling me a bunch of names. Jaden and I are still together, and we have a 9-month-old daughter. He still hangs out with Anita, and I still feel weird about it, but I guess I'm just gonna have to. Part 2 about why you just can't bring some of your friends around your boyfriend. So like I said, she was getting very upset with the fact that she would ask me to make plans last minute, and I would tell her that I'm busy with my boyfriend. And this went on throughout Jared and I's whole relationship, and it wasn't like I would ignore her. I would still hang out with her. I just wouldn't go and party and stuff like that because I respected my relationship. She would also always ask me to not bring my boyfriend to these parties, and that's another reason why I wouldn't go. So the one night she's like, listen, come out with me. You can bring your boyfriend. It won't be a problem, which was a shocker. So I was a little bit skeptical, but I said, okay. So we go to this party, and usually whenever I'm with Lily, I get really messed up, but I was trying to pace myself this night. And then she's like, come on, you don't mind if she gets drunk, right, Jared? Of course, him wanting me to have fun. He said no, he doesn't mind. She calls us an Uber, and then she asked for my boyfriend's Snapchat just so that way she could check up on us because I was too drunk. The entire ride home, Lily is blowing up Jared's phone, and we just think that she's trying to check on us. No. Instead, when we got home, he opened his phone, and it was actually Lily sending him a bunch of naked pictures. Part 2 about how my ex stole all of my stuff and gave it to his new girlfriend. So like I said, he comes, he grabs the keys, and he goes to my house. He's getting all of his stuff. When my neighbor, who is one of my friends, she's like freaking out, calling me over 10 times. Obviously, I'm at work, so I can't answer the phone, and then I get a text from her saying that he's there with his new girlfriend. Well, I guess she isn't really a new girlfriend if he's been dating her the whole relationship that we had, but you guys know what I mean. So I'm freaking out, and I call him, and then I hear her in the background talking to my dog. Now, obviously, I don't even want this girl in my apartment in general, so I'm like freaking out that she's trying to talk to my dog. So I'm yelling at him. I'm like, I want her out of the apartment. I'll call the police if you guys don't leave. Also, tell her to get away from my dog. So, he says okay, hangs up the phone, and I call my neighbor and I tell her, call the police if she goes in my apartment again. And less than 2 minutes later, my friend calls the police because his girlfriend started breaking stuff in my apartment and she took my dog. Literally, like they drove away with my dog and then let it go in the middle of the woods. But I guess it's okay because I got my dog back. Part 2 about why I will never go on a date ever again. So like I said, he takes us to the beach, we get on the jet ski, and it's just 2 of us on one jet ski, which I was low-key uncomfortable about because I thought that we were each going to get our own, so there would be no touching involved. And after the shit that he pulled, I definitely wish that I had my own jet ski. So apparently he's jet skied all of his life, he knew how to do this. Well, we go pretty far out from land because he knew the people and he didn't have to listen to any of the rules. He offered to let me drive it, but I did not want to because of the fact that he was going super fast and I did not want to do that shit. Well, listen to this. He flips us off the jet ski, right? And when he does that, all of a sudden it hits me. I am in the middle of the ocean. Like there's sharks, there's other things, there's creepy things, mysterious things we don't even know about. I literally start crying and he thinks it's funny. He gets on the jet ski and literally drives away. I'm not even joking. He left me there for 3 minutes. I could barely see land. And then he ended up coming back and he was like, ha ha ha, da da da. I never saw. Part 2 about how my cat got me grounded. And yes, I am talking about my pet cat. So like I said, my best friends are begging me to come out of the house. They're like, listen, do whatever you have to come to this party. This is the first and probably only party that we will ever be invited to in our entire lives. So at this point, I start planning to sneak out of my house. So my parents usually go to sleep at around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and they usually wake up at 5:30 in the morning. But since this party was on a Friday, obviously my parents aren't going to wake up at that time. They'll usually wake up around maybe 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. So this gave me a perfect amount of time to do what I needed to do, come back and not get caught. But just in case, I made sure to turn off any alarms on their phone. But I also had to make sure that I had a foolproof plan to get out of the house and get back in. Now, of course, I couldn't go through any of the doors in the house because of the stupid Ring doorbell. But there was one thing that did work in my favor. So my dad had been slowly but surely installing the window security alarms, but he hadn't made it to my room yet, so I was good to sneak out of my window. And thankfully, my window was on the first floor. Like for part 3. Storytime about how my cat got me grounded. And yes, I mean my literal pet cat got me grounded. So a little background information. I was 16 and I was a freshman in high school. And my parents were extremely strict. Now, of course, there was the usual no hanging out with boys, no hanging out with anybody on the weekdays. Well, my parents took it a step further. Actually, no, they took it 10 miles further. I got my phone taken every night at 6 o'clock. Even on the weekends, and my friends were only allowed to come over for 8 hours exactly on the weekends. And they had to have a ride to and from my house. Well, usually my friend group and I were never invited to any kind of parties, but this one girl who had just moved to our school, she was throwing a huge party and she invited everybody, not just the popular kids. So obviously my friends begged me to go. They were like, please, we can sneak over there. Your parents go to bed early anyways. For part 2. Part 2 about this boy who stabbed me with a pencil in kindergarten. So like I said, everybody would pretty much bully him, and I was one of the kids that just sat back and laughed, didn't say anything to him directly. Eventually, we were getting in trouble for discluding him. We would all have to stay inside during recess with our heads down on the desk in the dark. Then everybody act like they were going to include him. The one time they were like, okay, we're playing hide and seek, you go hide, and then they never went to find him. So then this kid actually started getting violent. My guess is because the teachers and principal were not doing anything about it. When everybody was walking, he would purposely trip kids. This one time, this girl brought in pencils for the whole class, and she didn't give him one. So he said that he felt sick the one day, and all the kids went out to recess, and he went around and broke every single pencil. And I came in and I found it, so I told the teacher. And then during nap time, he put his mat by me. And when I finally fall asleep, he literally comes over and stabs me in the back of the neck with a pencil. Part 3 about how my best friend made my entire school hate me. So like I said, Ivy sent the pictures and everybody saw them. And I'm talking even the people in high school. The next day, Ivy and Layla are in the same science class together. And none of their friends were there that day, so they ended up working on a group assignment together. And just like that, they were best friends again. Well, I get thrown under the bus, the teachers come and pull me out of my class and they search my phone and they find the Instagram account on my phone. Then when I told them it was also on Layla's phone, they went on her phone and they didn't find anything, of course. I get suspended and Layla and Ivy tell everybody that I was the one who made the fake Snapchat account and the Instagram accounts. And the whole week that I was suspended, I was getting messages from a lot of people that I went to school with and people that I didn't even know from high school. I was getting tagged in stuff on Instagram of people saying how much of a weirdo I am. Well, a few days into my suspension, Layla and Ivy talked my boyfriend into breaking up with me. They faked text messages between each other and made it look like I was talking to another guy. And then they faked another conversation between Layla and I. Like for part 4. Part 2 about how my best friend made my whole school hate me. So like I said, we were all friends in the group, but I was Layla's best friend. So her and I would pretty much boss everybody else around. But one day Layla tells one of our friends, Nova, to go and listen to what Ivy and her friends were talking about during lunch. Because Nova had friends who sat at the same lunch tables as them. Well, I guess Ivy was talking about how she was going to try to talk to every guy that Layla talked to just to make her mad. And that started a whole war. Layla and I have a sleepover that same night and she's like, we should make an Instagram account and expose her. Now, Ivy was notorious for sending out explicit pictures to guys. Like, even if she didn't know them, she loved the attention from guys. So Layla told me that we were going to make a fake Snapchat account and try to get her to send pictures. I'm not going to lie, it was kind of sad. She literally sent them within 5 minutes of Layla texting her pretending to be some guy. After that, we both made Instagram accounts that were named Exposing Ivy or something along those lines. And we made 2 accounts just so that way, if one got taken down, hopefully the other one would stay up. We posted the pictures on there and a lot of people saw them, like for part 3. Part 2 about why my sister is probably worse than yours. So like I said, my sister and I start school, I become friends with her friends, and she introduces me to this guy that she's been best friends with for a while. Him and I end up talking, I really like him, he really likes me, and my sister would always hype me up. She would be like, oh my god, you should get with him, he's such a nice guy, you guys would look so great together. So the one night he asked me if I wanted to go on a date with him, and of course I said yes, so I ran to my sister's room, I was so excited to tell her. So I knock on her door, I go in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, guess what? She's like, what? I'm like, he asked me out on a date, and she just sits there and stares at me. And when I ask her what's wrong, she's like, oh my god, you knew that I liked him, you're such a bad sister, I would have never done this to you. So then I started to feel bad, but then I didn't because I remembered how she used to hype me up. So the next day, a few hours before my date, she comes in my room. She's like, hey, I'm really sorry about how I acted yesterday. I would love to help you get ready for your date if you'll let me. I feel so bad. And we're sisters, so of course I get over it, and I tell her yes, I want her to help me, like for part 3. Part 3 about how this girl and her boyfriend literally beat me up. So like I said, I told his girlfriend everything about how he didn't want her. I sent her the receipts and everything. And then she has the audacity to tell me I'm disgusting, I'm this, I'm that, saying that I'm gross for even doing anything with him. I should have known that he had a girlfriend. I should have told him off. Like, sis, your man did not mention you once. He didn't even mention you as an ex-girlfriend, so put the blame on him, not me. So later that day, he invites me over, and I am shook because I at least thought that he was going to bring it up and be like, why did you text my girlfriend? So I thought that maybe she was one of those girls where she's like, OMG, my man is never wrong. I'm not even going to confront him because I don't want him to break up with me, and it just wasn't his fault. So fast forward, I get to his house. I usually just walk in because I've been over there so many times. Well, as soon as I walk in the door, him and his girlfriend start wailing on me. I ended up with a few broken ribs, but I also ended up pregnant with his child. His family thinks that he should be with me since I'm having his kid. She decided to stay with him, so she comes to every prenatal appointment.